Okay, well, I'll go ahead and call to order a meeting in the DuPage County Home Advisory Group for May 3rd, 2022. Can we have a roll call, please?
Don Bastian, Ruth Broder, Amy Chavez, Lori Chassie.
Here.
Michael Crandall.
Here.
Paula Garcia.
Here.
William Hennett.
Here.
Kevin Mantles.
Here.
Lynn LaPlante. Here. Kalisha Page. Donna Puchowski. Julie Renahan.
Here.
James A.
Thank you. We do have a quorum today. Any public comment? Seeing or not hearing anybody, we'll move right to approval of minutes for the Home Advisory Group regular meeting of Tuesday, April 5th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Next item is an action item, recommendation for approval of early release of 2 liens on the property located at 1579 Floyd Broad Lane, Glendale Heights for project HM 92-03B Bridge Communities.
So moved. Second.
We got a first and a second. Staff report comment.
This is very similar to an item we had last month. It's again a nonprofit provider that's reached out and asked for us to early release. The federal compliance period is done, so now we're in just a county period, which gives us more flexibility in terms of whether we can release or not. My perspective has always been to be more flexible with nonprofits on this kind of request than developers. It gives them a little more flexibility. In this case, they're looking to rehab the property. Just gives them a little more flexibility, takes debt off the property, and the county has no liabilities as the federal period is met. So.
Any questions amongst the members? Okay, as this is a recommendation, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Next item on other business. Any other business?
Nope.
Okay, then look for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next meeting, June 7th. Thank you very much. Okay, go 5 now.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sticking around. I call to order the DuPage County CDC Executive Committee for May 3rd, 2022. Roll call.
Don Bastian, Amy Chavez, Lori Chassie.
There she is.
Oh, okay. You're here, right? Okay. Lori Chassie.
Here.
Michael Crandall.
Here.
Paula Garcia.
Here.
William Hennett.
Here.
Kevin Mantles.
Here.
Lynn LaPlante.
Here.
Kalisha Page. Donna Puchowski. Julie Renahan.
Here.
James A. Okay, we're good.
Thank you. Any public comment? Hearing none. Approval of minutes for the regular meeting of Tuesday, February 1st, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Okay, who went first?
Yeah, you got both.
So you give it to Lynn and then.
Okay.
You can arm wrestle.
Roll call vote.
Okay. Lynn LaPlante.
Aye.
Lori Chassie.
Aye.
Amy, let me see. Amy Chavez.
Aye.
Michael Crandall.
Aye.
Paula Garcia.
Aye.
William Hennett.
Aye.
Kevin Mantles.
Aye.
And Julie Renahan.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is an action item, a recommendation for approval of a third modification to an emergency solutions grant COVID response agreement with DuPage Pads, Emergency Solutions Grant Program CARES Act 2, project number ESCV 19G, increasing funding by an additional $219,477 for a total grant award of $1,744,477.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Staff comment?
I meant to start this meeting by saying welcome back to Marge Fletcher, who missed last meeting. Sorry, I should have started with that. We have, this is kind of a recurring item too. We've come back with this several times. The last time I believe I said this was the last request, so now we have one request on addition to the last request. But the message is the same. These are difficult funds to spend. We have offered to all partners to see who needs additional money. We're trying to make sure we can spend out all the money at the end. The points I would make about this one is obviously Pads acquired the shelter, and so this helps them cover the expenses up to the point of that they acquired it. There's also some funds in there to help with the Woodridge clients who were displaced because of the tornado. And then for the clients that they have in Naperville, they want them to stay in the hotel through the end of the school year. So that's why there are still some hotel expenses going through there. So we looked at everything that they've received from all sources to determine what this amount should be. So we looked at everything they got through CRF and everything they've got from other sources in terms of hotel assistance. And that was the number we came up with of what we could still provide to them. So 219,477. So this should be the last one of these. We did get notice from the federal government that the deadline for these funds will be extended some. There's a possibility we could receive an additional allocation, but we still, again, these are just helping them cover the cost of the hotels for clients.
Thank you. Any comment amongst the members?
It's worth it. This is just so important, and I'm happy to vote yes for this.
Any other comment? Okay, as the recommendation, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item is an informational item, proposed funding categories for community development block grant public service.
I actually want to kick this off before I throw it to you. So what Dave is going to talk about is basically kind of a narrowing of what we fund with our public services dollars. I wanted to give as somebody who's been around for a very long time, I wanted to give just a little bit of context. This is absolutely not the first time that we've had to do this. Back in 2003, our CDBG allocation was $4.9 million. So that's 20 years ago. And what are we at this year? 3.7, something like 3.9. In 2010, we were at 4.2 million. So from time to time, we've had to say, all right, we need a reset. Back in 2003, we did these things called needs clusters, and we funded seniors, people with disabilities, families in crisis, housing and homelessness, and neighborhood resource centers. And then I think right around 2010, we had to say, you know what, we need to focus. And so really what this is just a continuation of our need to say, all right, we got to figure out how do we really impact these dollars, given that even flat funding is a decrease, because obviously most of what we pay for is wages for either county staff or for nonprofit organizations. And so, you know, salaries, healthcare, all that kind of stuff goes up. So I just kind of wanted to kick that off with some kind of historical context, that this isn't just Dave's idea. This is something that we've had to do kind of a reset. And actually what it works out, it's probably about every 10 years that we're kind of resetting our focus. So with that, I'll throw it over to Dave.
Yeah, so I would say I first brought this up about a year ago. So we talked about how we were going to reset this, and then this is the year. So currently there's only 2 contracts that we have, and then people will apply this fall for contracts that'll start in the 23 year. I would say there's 2 points that one is my own philosophy for larger, less contracts. That's sort of something we've done with our capital grants, and this is applying that same principle to the public service grants. I do want to say that all the programs that we fund are great programs. It's not, you know, it's hard to narrow because it means someone's not going to get funding. They got funding in 21, but I still think it's the right thing to do. The other perspective to bring is from HUD's perspective, they talk about a new and quantifiable increase. So they want to see that these dollars are adding new services and not just kind of maintaining status quo services. And so we will have a lot more language in the application regarding that. So we want people to come with, you know, how are you increasing the capacity for services? Obviously, the 4 categories, they kind of all have to fit under the umbrella of housing and homeless services. I've made that umbrella, or I'm proposing to make that umbrella a little bit smaller. Emergency shelter, not specifically just the recent acquisition, although that is certainly a concern in terms of whether they'll have the operating expenses to manage that, or just making sure we're supporting the operational costs for that. But there's other emergency shelters providers in the county too that I would expect to apply. Access to affordable housing, that's typically a situation where we have some funds that will pay for rent, but not people. So these funds can help pay for the people to help make sure that there's case management to access the rental support. Foreclosure prevention, I just wanted in there because we still have almost 70% of our county is homeowner. So I mean, that's still a large population. There's been a lot of the assistance that's come out has been focused on rent, but we still are mostly homeownership county. And then legal services is one that it's really geared at the rental population. That population is typically the one who accesses legal services. Although with all of these, with all of these, we're going to look at it all the way to the point of funding, because we're still in a very resource-rich environment. There's still a lot of funding that's going on. There's still a lot of projects that are in COVID money we're working. So we want to make sure not to duplicate things. We want to make sure to complement things. So we will look at the applications as they come in, and then we'll look at funding recommendations all the way to the point of when we're coming here with our action plan saying we want to fund these projects in 2023. So legal services, as an example, they have a fair amount of COVID dollars that are available to them. And so we will look at how they're spending on that, whether they're having a need that's outside of that, that's for non-COVID related legal services, that kind of thing, as we look for those. The only other point I was going to make is there is a fair housing component that we fund through our admin funds. So that's a sort of an additional category, but it's something that we fund every year through our admin. So it doesn't necessarily go as a separate project. And then, yeah, I mean, to give you some context, last year we had 16 contracts, or between the lowest one was at $8,700, but the average was closer to $30,000. I would very much like to see us in the range of 5 to 8 contracts, $80,000 to 100, maybe 110, 120. So our cap is, so you can do the math. We're only allowed to spend 15% of our money on this. So if it's $4 million, we can only spend 600,000. So you can sort of see how we'll get to that number. But we'll have the same transparency we've had in the past in terms of all the applications that come in, and you'll have a chance to see all those, and you'll see the scores, and you'll see our funding recommendations and all of that. So I think that's all I have to present. So any comments or questions on that?
Can you give us an idea of who's going to miss out now, so that, and what those look like? So obviously those smaller amounts, do those people have other places to go, and what generally have we covered under those smaller amounts, and what are we facing? Sure.
So we did look at, for example, the DuPage kind of transformation grants that are going through the DuPage Foundation. They're funding some of the categories, but to answer your question, so there's neighborhood resource centers. We've had some small grants with neighborhood resource centers that fund some programs there, after school programs. There's employment and job readiness programs that we've had. There's homeless prevention. That's an area where there's a lot of other funds that will fund homeless prevention. We had some homeless prevention programs that were funded through here. And then some group home and substance abuse services. So all those kind of fell under that broader umbrella of homeless and housing services. And then I'm proposing that we narrow that down a little bit.
I agree with the narrowing. I just want to make sure that we kind of have a plan in place, so when we get the calls where people have maybe found assistance here before, that we have, and I know you guys probably do, but you have a little bit of a game plan probably to help them fill that gap maybe.
Yeah, I would say the DuPage kind of transformation grants have categories that overlap with that somewhat. Okay. And that's certainly an area that we look at. The neighborhood resource centers are a good example of one that is, not aware of a sort of an overlap or a duplicate for that specific one. Those were our smallest contracts. They were very serving of, and again, they weren't really increasing services. They were maintaining what was there because they're such a small. There was 3 left.
Yeah. So
historically done more.
Yeah, back in the early 2000s, there were 19 neighborhood resource centers throughout the county, and the CDBG funding was a small portion of their operations. So most of those have gone by the wayside, and the ones that exist, we've had very small contracts.
So we did, so this year we cut basically everyone because we said we wanted to reset the program. So, and I have had some conversations with executive directors or people who wanted to kind of talk through what our process was or why we made that decision. And so I've had some of those conversations already. There may be more, especially when we go to the application cycle and that people see that their category that they're thinking is not in there, or there may be people that kind of try to do the apply anyway, and then maybe may determine that they're ineligible, and then there may be questions that come out of that. So we'll be prepared for that process.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just real quick, I mean, $80,000, I mean, are we looking at other jurisdictions? Like, where did the $80,000 come from? What's that threshold?
That was set by me arbitrarily. My rationale for that was more along the lines of trying to pay for a full person instead of part of someone. So if I, look at sort of our average salaries that we're paying for, most of this pays for people. So if I look at average salaries plus benefits, it's around that 70, 80,000 for a full person. So that was my rationale for saying, we want to make sure we're increasing services. We give us an application where you're adding someone to do X. But that's a number that could certainly be discussed by the board if you had pushback or not, sorry, that was the wrong word, but if you had input on that, it would be welcome, right? So that's why this is a discussion item with the board.
Do you
Any
have
other
any thoughts on that? Remember any? Or
Well, you just said you said it arbitrarily, so I guess I'd feel remiss if I didn't follow up there. I mean, are we looking at other area, like, I mean, is this pretty much the going rate? Will we see 80,000? I mean, is that a hard and fast? I mean, you said required minimum.
Well,
Is
let
it a
me,
required minimum or is it somewhat flexible?
well, we can set it by us. We can set the application standards for what we want that minimum to be. HUD does not require that we have a minimum of X. So that's where in
Is it
terms
more of
of
a
being,
suggestion or a hard and fast? I guess is what
I think it should be hard and fast by the point we get to the application. I think at this point, it's a suggestion and if you think that, or if the committee thinks that should be pushed down a little bit, I think that's a fine comment to make, and we can make that before it ever goes out to the street kind of for applications.
Looking
Did
for
that make
breadcrumbs,
sense?
Mary.
Well,
Did that make sense?
I mean, should it
did
be
that-
75? Should it be 80? I mean, that's what I'm looking for your
I
expertise.
do think Dan, I do think Dave's, kind of thought that, salary and benefits for one FTE is probably, I think 80 might be a little high for that, but, if a case manager's at 50,000 and your benefits are 30%, you're talking about 65. So maybe we make it 60. I think the logic behind it makes a lot of sense, that it's a matter of identifying what the appropriate number is. But I think what's salary and benefits for one FTE, I think is absolutely a good marker.
Yeah, we typically use 40% for our.
That's right, ours are
we're just
40, but
estimating, but
I agree with the logic of a full-time person, absolutely. But just based on your example, I think maybe we are shooting a little high. I would hate to turn somebody down, particularly since this is a one-time and when we're not going to be preserving programming. I would hate to saddle a smaller agency with a higher salary than they can continue to maintain. So if we could lower that down, making clear that we need a full-time body, we can take that down to 65, just in case.
yeah, it's a minimum, so obviously they can go above.
Mhm.
Right.
Right,
it can
that's
go
just a
above.
minimum, and then that just, yeah.
what we don't want to do is set the minimum so low that we end up with, 16 contracts
Right.
again.
Right. We want to make sure that they're being paid equitably and that you're attracting the best
Yeah, more
possible
qualified people.
candidates. Exactly.
I'll also say that in terms of timing, these applications would go out in August, right? When the applications would be due probably October, November.
Yeah.
Meaning that the DuPage Transformation Partnership grants, both the immediate intervention and the transformational grants, those decisions will, with the immediate intervention decisions will be made by June, and the transformational grant decisions, I think, will be made in September. So we'll be able to have some context of what's being funded out of that as we bring the CDBG recommendations forward. So that, I think that should be very helpful in making sure that we're not duplicating, or we can also make sure that if there's gaps that weren't filled by that program, that we can plug in CDBG.
And so since this is just informational today, could we maybe get a little bit more information of what some of these salaries are? And maybe then we have more of an average as a committee, and then we can commit to that maybe the next round, just so we've got that tangible, if that would help everyone feel more comfortable.
Yeah,
Could I also ask, I don't see it in here, but could we get a list of the current organizations that are being funded in the dollar amounts?
yeah, so, sure, so it would be, currently there's only 2, so it would be, but it'd be really the ones who were funded in 2021, we could get you that list for sure. So we did basically a 1-year pause on the program, so we said we wanted to kind of end everyone on one period and then do a new applications. So the ones that were continued this year were just an internal one to the county, and another one that really just complements another home program that we have. But yes, we can provide that.
Before that though, would it be possible to get that just to see what historically the program has funded?
Yes, absolutely. I can have both of those for next month. I mean, we still have time for this, so.
Okay, any other questions? action items. Okay, does that give you enough preliminary direction?
Yeah, that's actually, that's exactly what we wanted to do today. So that's great.
And you'll be, once that's completed at our next available meeting.
Yep.
We'll be able to discuss it in further detail. Okay, any other business anyone want to bring up? Okay, we can motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.